Rain poured down like the sky was angry, drumming on the roof of the half-built school in a small village outside Ibadan. Mud swallowed people's slippers as they ran for cover, builders shouting at each other while trying to pull their tools to safety. In the middle of the chaos, a Silver Range Rover stopped by the roadside, its tire splashing muddy water onto the rough path. The tinted window rolled down, and a woman's voice called out, calm but commanding, "Who is in charge here?" Nobody answered at first. Everyone was too busy trying to save their work from the heavy rain. But then one tall young man, his shirt soaked and sticking to his skin, turned. His name was Chuka, and he was not just a builder. He was the only one who stayed when others left the project unpaid. He wiped the rain from his face and stepped closer to the car. Inside sat a woman wearing a white baboo with gold embroidery. Her face was striking, like someone used to boardrooms in big cities, not muddy village roads. Her name was Adiz Nwokolo, one of Nigeria's youngest billionaires, known across Lagos and Abuja for building estates and tech hubs. But nobody in the village expected her to ever set foot here. Their eyes met through the falling rain. "Are you the one risking your life in this storm?" Adiz asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. Chuka swallowed, surprised by her tone. "Yes, madam. If we stop now, the foundation will break. The water will wash everything we've done." Adiz stared for a long second, then opened her car door despite her assistant shouting, "Madam, you can't go out in this rain." She stepped into the mud, gold sandals sinking. Chuka blinked in disbelief as the billionaire walked straight to him, rain running down her face like silver tears. She bent to help him hold a wooden beam steady, her perfectly polished nails digging into the wet wood. Gasps rose from the other workers as they watched a billionaire help a builder in the middle of a storm. Something shifted in that moment. Chuka felt it in his chest like a spark, and Adiz felt it too, though she didn't yet have a name for it. Their hands brushed as they lifted the beam together, and both froze. Time itself seemed to stop, the rain fading into a distant sound. But then, a loud cracking noise ripped through the air. One of the scaffolds, weakened by the storm, began to tip over. A young boy carrying nails screamed as the heavy wooden planks came crashing down toward him. Chuka's heart stopped. Adiz's eyes widened. The boy froze, too shocked to move. And in that split second, Chuka dropped the beam and sprinted forward, arms outstretched, throwing himself between the boy and the falling scaffold. To be continued. It had not always been like this for Chuka. Months earlier, before the rain, before the billionaire's car appeared, he was just another young man with calloused hands and dreams bigger than his village. He woke every morning to the sound of roosters crowing and his mother coughing in the small clay house they called home. Money was always short, and work was never enough. He would carry his tools to different sites, building walls and patching roofs under the hot sun of Oyo State. Some days were easy, some days were hard, but he never complained. He had younger sisters who looked up to him and an old father whose back pain no longer allowed him to work. One morning, a community elder came to his door with urgent news. "Chuka, the school project by the church has stopped again. The big men in Ibadan have not sent money. The contractor ran away. We can't let it collapse, my son. You are strong. You are honest. Will you go and help us at least hold it together?" Chuka wiped sweat from his brow and nodded. "I will go, Baba. Even if they don't pay me, the children need that school." And so he went, day after day. He mixed cement with his bare hands, tied rods with old wires, and slept some nights on the site because home was too far and the bus fare too high. Other builders came and left when there was no pay, but Chuka stayed. He stayed when the rains began early, stayed when food was scarce, stayed even when his mother told him to rest. In Lagos, miles away, Adiz sat in her glass office overlooking the ocean. She was powerful, respected, and lonely. Her life was filled with meetings and numbers, but something in her heart was empty. Her assistant, Say, walked in one afternoon with a file. "Madam, look at these pictures from Ibadan. That school you donated to. I think they've abandoned it." Adiz frowned as she flipped through the pictures. She had given millions, and yet the project was crumbling. She remembered her own childhood, walking miles to a broken school under the harmattan sun. Her jaw set. "Prepare the car," she said. "I want to see it myself." That was how, on that rainy day, their worlds met. Chuka, the builder who refused to quit. Adiz, the billionaire who carried memories of a poor childhood in her heart. Neither of them expected that the moment their hands touched would change their lives forever. But right now, as the scaffold crashed downward and Chuka leapt to shield the boy, Adiz's breath caught in her throat. She reached out without thinking, her gold bracelets clinking as she screamed his name, a name she hadn't known 5 minutes ago, but now felt like she had known forever. And in that terrifying second, with wood and metal falling fast, both their lives were about to turn in a way neither could have imagined. The crashing sound was deafening. Chuka felt the force slam into his back as he curled his body over the boy, his arms gripping the child tight. The weight of the falling scaffold pressed him into the wet earth, mud splashing into his eyes and mouth. For a heartbeat, there was no sound, no movement, just the pain tearing through his shoulder and the terrified heartbeat of the boy against his chest. Then voices exploded around them. "Chuka, help him. Somebody lift it." Strong hands dragged the wood off his back. Chuka gasped as fresh air hit his face, rain still pouring down. His vision blurred, but he felt the boy being lifted out of his arms, crying and calling for his mother. Adiz was kneeling beside him, her white gown now drenched and brown with mud. Her hands shook as she touched his cheek. "Can you hear me?" Her voice cracked in a way that startled even her assistant. Chuka blinked, coughing. "The boy, is he?" "He's safe," Adiz said quickly. "You saved him." Her words felt far away. The pain in Chuka's shoulder spread through his chest like fire. He tried to sit up, but she held him down gently. "Don't move. Please." The other builders gathered around, their eyes wide. Nobody had ever seen a woman like her kneeling in the mud, her gold bracelets splattered with dirt, her soft hands cradling a poor builder like a brother. The rain softened as if the sky itself was watching. An older mason whispered, "This is how God moves. Look at Madam." Adiz's driver ran up with an umbrella, but she shook her head sharply. "Call for help instead. We need to get him to a clinic." "I'm fine," Chuka tried to say, but his voice cracked. A sharp wave of pain made him wince. Adiz looked at him, something warm and fierce rising in her chest. She had seen many men in her life, politicians, bankers, CEOs, but none of them had ever looked at her with such quiet strength even while hurt. "Hold on," she whispered, gripping his hand. "I won't leave you." And in that rain-soaked moment, with the scaffold wreckage scattered around them, something unspoken passed between them, something deeper than gratitude, something that made her heart race in a way she didn't understand. Weeks before that rainy day, Chuka's life had been a rhythm of sweat and stubborn hope. He woke before sunrise to the sound of his mother grinding beans in the kitchen. "Eat something before you go," she would say, sliding a plate of akara toward him. "Ma, you keep the food. I'll eat later," Chuka always replied, though his stomach rumbled. He tied his worn boots, grabbed his tools, and walked down the dusty road to the school site, humming old highlife songs under his breath. At the site, he worked until his muscles burned, lifting heavy blocks and mixing concrete with a shovel that had lost its handle padding. The other workers teased him. "Chuka, why are you still here? They haven't paid in months." He only smiled. "It's not about money. When they see the building stand, maybe they'll pay. If we leave, the children lose." In the evenings, he sat under a neem tree sketching small house plans in a torn exercise book. He dreamed of building something of his own one day, something strong enough to outlive storms. But for now, his dreams had to wait. Adiz's life was the opposite. Every day in Lagos, she wore crisp designer suits and walked into glass towers where people stood when she entered. Her phone never stopped ringing. Clients, investors, reporters. She was used to power, to people obeying her orders. But at night, when the city lights blinked outside her window, she sometimes stood by the glass and remembered her childhood in Enugu, when her parents couldn't afford school fees, and her mother patched her uniform by candlelight. When she heard that a school project she had funded was falling apart, she felt a sting in her chest. Her assistant had said, "Madam, leave it for the contractors." But Adiz shook her head. No. If I don't go, who will care? She had driven for hours, passing villages and goats wandering across the road, until she saw the unfinished walls rising from the mud. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment, but she had not expected to find one man still working, alone, in a storm. Back in the present, as the rain eased into a drizzle, Chuka groaned and tried to sit again. Let me finish the work. Adiz pressed a hand to his chest gently. Rest. You've done enough. But the foundation. Look around, she said softly. The other builders, moved by what they had seen, were lifting tools again, securing beams, working together without complaint. For the first time in weeks, the site was alive with hope. Chuka's eyes softened. He let himself lie back, breathing slowly. Thank you, madam, he whispered. Adiz shook her head. Don't thank me. You reminded me why I started all this. Her assistant finally arrived with a pickup truck to carry Chuka to the nearest clinic. Adiz stayed close, her hand on his arm as they lifted him in. Their eyes met again, and this time, there was no mistaking it, that strange, warm feeling neither of them could name. But just as the truck engine roared to life, a sudden shout came from one of the builders still on site. Madam, the cement store, look. Everyone turned. A section of the half-built wall had started to lean dangerously, groaning under the weight of the storm-soaked roof. 2 workers were trapped inside, screaming for help as the structure shifted. Adiz gasped, her heart lurching. Chuka tried to sit up despite his injury, eyes wide. No, not again. The wall creaked louder, chunks of cement falling. And then, with a deep rumble, the wall began to collapse toward the trapped men. The deep rumble of breaking blocks filled the air, and for a moment, time froze. Adiz felt her chest tighten as she watched the heavy wall tilt further, the wooden props giving way one by one. Rainwater still dripped from the roof, making the muddy ground slippery. One of the trapped men screamed, "Help! Somebody help!" The other, a young apprentice named Cunnel, pounded on the wall with his fists. "I can't get out. The door is blocked." Adiz's driver yelled, "Everyone back. The whole thing will fall." But Chuka's voice cut through the chaos. "No. If it falls, they'll die under it." Ignoring the pain in his shoulder, he pushed himself out of the back of the pickup. Adiz tried to hold him back. "Chuka, please, you're hurt." He shook his head, staggering forward. "I can't watch them die." 2 other builders rushed to his side. "Oga Chuka, we go follow you," one said, fear shining in his eyes. Chuka grabbed a long plank and nodded. "We brace it from this side. Adiz, get them ready with rope. If we can hold it, they can crawl out." Adiz, still shaken but quick-minded, snapped to action. "Rope! Give me rope!" she ordered. Her driver and assistant ran to the tool shed, slipping in the mud as they pulled out whatever they could find. Nylon ropes, old electric wires, anything strong enough to pull someone through. Chuka and the 2 men shoved their shoulders against the wall, straining with all their strength. The wall groaned, dust showering down, but it held just barely. Chuka's injured arm screamed in pain, yet he pushed harder, his jaw set. "Cunnel, crawl now." Cunnel dropped to his knees, scraping through the narrow gap. His fingers clawed at the mud until Adiz threw a rope to him. "Take it. Pull yourself," she shouted, her voice fierce. Cunnel grabbed it, and with her help, he slid out just as a large brick fell and shattered beside him. His face was streaked with mud and tears. The other one, Musa, is still inside. Chuka gritted his teeth. "Musa, move. Now." From inside came a weak voice. "My leg gets stuck." Adiz's assistant gasped. "Madam, the wall can't hold much longer." Chuka's knees buckled under the weight. His vision blurred from the pain in his shoulder, but he forced himself to stay upright. "Prop it with another beam," he shouted. One of the builders grabbed another plank, jamming it under the sagging wall. But the rain-soaked soil was too soft. The beam sank deeper instead of holding firm. The wall shifted again, tilting more. Musa screamed in terror, and Chuka felt his own heartbeat slam against his ribs. "If I can't hold it, he'll die." Adiz dropped to the ground, not caring that her gown was now soaked and torn. She grabbed the rope and yelled into the narrow space, "Musa, tie this to your body." He fumbled in the dark, groaning in pain. Chuka shouted, "Pull, Adiz, even if he can't crawl." Adiz wrapped the rope around her wrists, planting her feet in the mud. "Pull with me," she screamed at the others. They grabbed the rope too, heaving in unison. The rope went taut. Musa's cry of pain pierced the air as he was dragged through the small gap. Chuka felt his arms giving out, but he pushed with one last burst of strength. The wall groaned, then split apart completely, crashing down in a spray of dust and debris. But Musa tumbled out at the last second, rolling into the mud as the wall shattered behind him. Adiz fell backward, gripping the rope, tears of relief spilling down her face. Chuka collapsed onto his knees, coughing, his chest heaving. The two rescued men were pulled to safety, and for a moment, everyone just stood there in the rain, stunned that they were all still alive. Adiz's eyes found Chuka's through the chaos. They stared at each other, mud-streaked, exhausted, but alive. Her heart pounded in a way she couldn't explain, and she felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You," she whispered, stepping closer to him. "You could have died." Chuka wiped blood from his lip, breathing hard. "So could they. I couldn't. I couldn't just watch." Adiz reached out, cupping his face with trembling hands, not caring who was watching. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she said softly. Chuka's lips parted, but before he could answer, a loud engine roared in the distance. Headlights cut through the misty rain. A black SUV sped down the muddy road toward them, splashing water as it skidded to a stop. A man in a crisp blue kaftan jumped out, flanked by two others. His face was sharp, his eyes cold. "Who is in charge here?" he barked. Adiz straightened, still holding the rope. "I am," she replied, her voice steady despite her heartbeat. The man's gaze swept over the wreckage, then landed on Chuka, who was still on his knees. His lip curled in disdain. "You," he pointed. "You're the one who stayed here without permission?" Chuka blinked, confused. I only wanted to finish the work." "You think you can work on my site without clearance?" the man snapped, stepping closer. Adiz frowned. "Your site? This land belongs to the church. I funded this project myself." The man cut her off with a sneer. "Not anymore. I bought this land last week, and I will not have a filthy builder and a woman meddling in my property." The words stung like a slap. The builders murmured nervously, some stepping back. Chuka pushed himself to his feet, wincing in pain. "Sir, with respect, we've been working here for months. You can't just—" "I can do what I like," the man snapped. He waved to the two men behind him. "Clear them out. Now." One of the men reached into his jacket, and Adiz saw the glint of a weapon. Her breath caught. "Wait, you can't." But the man didn't wait. He pulled out a pistol and cocked it, pointing it toward the workers as the other man moved to grab Chuka by the arm. The builders froze in shock. Adiz's heart raced, her eyes darting to Chuka, whose fists clenched despite his injury. The man with the gun stepped forward, his finger on the trigger, his voice low and dangerous. "I said clear this place, or someone is going to bleed." The sight of the pistol froze the entire site into silence. Rain dripped from the broken scaffold, ticking like a slow clock, while fear spread across the faces of the builders. Adiz's breath caught in her throat. She had faced boardroom battles, political threats, and business wars, but never had she stared down the barrel of a gun on a muddy village site. Her heart pounded, so hard it felt like the sound echoed in her ears. "Please," she said, stepping forward despite the mud pulling at her feet. Her voice trembled but carried a surprising strength. "You don't need to do this. Whatever you think you've bought, these men are only building a school. Let us talk." "Shut up," the man with the gun barked, waving the weapon toward her. "Do you want to be the first to fall?" Adiz froze, her chest rising and falling quickly. Chuka's jaw tightened. He had been in danger before, on rooftops, in quarries, under heavy scaffolds, but this was different. This was a man threatening lives because of pride and greed. "Leave her out of this," Chuka said, stepping forward despite the pain in his shoulder. His voice was low and steady. "If you have a problem, take it with me. But don't you dare point that at her. The man laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the air. Look at you. A common laborer playing hero in the mud. You think I care about you? He jerked the pistol closer, eyes narrowing. Kneel. Now. Adi's eyes widened. No, don't. Chuka didn't move. His heartbeat was wild, but his face stayed calm. If I kneel, you'll still hurt them. So no, I won't kneel. The man's expression darkened. His finger tightened on the trigger. A builder gasped. One of the apprentices began to cry silently, pressing himself against a wooden post. Adi stepped between them before she could think, spreading her arms out as if to shield Chuka. Her voice broke, but she spoke anyway. Shoot me first, then, because if you hurt him, you might as well bury me too. The man blinked, startled by her words, but his face hardened again. Move, woman. You don't know who I am. I don't care who you are, Adi snapped, her voice suddenly fierce, her tears mixing with rain and mud. These men are building for children, and you're threatening them like a coward with a gun. Something in her words made the builders straighten behind her, even though their legs still trembled. Chuka's chest swelled with pride and fear all at once. He wanted to drag her back to safety, but his feet were rooted to the ground, watching the billionaire stand like a shield in front of him. The man with the gun cocked his head. Bold words, he muttered. Let's see how bold you are when. Suddenly, the sound of revving engines roared from the road. Headlights appeared through the drizzle, cutting bright beams across the site. 3 police trucks sped toward them, sirens wailing faintly in the distance. Adi's driver shouted with relief. Madam, look. The man with the gun cursed under his breath, stepping back. The man in the blue kaftan hissed. We're leaving. Now. No. Chuka growled, but the man grabbed him by the collar before he could move. You think you've won? The man snarled, spittle flying in Chuka's face. This is not over. You hear me? This is not over. He shoved Chuka hard to the ground, then bolted toward the SUV as his armed men covered him. Gunshots cracked into the air, not aimed at anyone, but enough to scatter the builders into hiding. Adi stumbled, falling to her knees in the mud, hands covering her head as one bullet smashed into a metal drum nearby. Chuka dragged himself toward her, despite his shoulder screaming in pain. Stay down, he shouted, grabbing her wrist and pulling her behind a stack of cement blocks. The SUV spun in the mud, tires flinging stones, and roared off down the road, just as the police trucks skidded onto the site. Officers jumped out, weapons ready, scanning the chaos. Adi's was shaking, mud streaking her cheeks like war paint. Chuka crouched beside her, still gripping her hand, his own breath ragged. Around them, the builders slowly rose from their hiding spots, wide-eyed and trembling. A senior police officer strode toward them, shouting over the fading sound of engines. Who fired shots? What happened here? Adi stood slowly, brushing mud from her arms, her voice low but steady. An armed man just threatened my workers and tried to claim this land. Chuka winced as he tried to stand. Adi's immediately supported him, slipping an arm around his waist. Easy, she whispered. He looked at her with gratitude, his eyes soft despite the adrenaline still in his blood. The police officer's gaze fell on Chuka. Are you hurt? Chuka shook his head quickly. Not much, but they'll come back. I can feel it. Adi's jaw clenched. She turned to the officer. Double the patrols here. Tonight, I'll handle the rest. The officer nodded, waving to his men. Secure the area. As the builders began to gather again, Chuka sat on a block, holding his shoulder, watching Adi's bark orders with fire in her eyes. He had never seen someone so fearless, so unwilling to back down even when a gun was pointed at them. She turned to him, kneeling so they were eye to eye. They're gone for now, she said softly. But I promise you, Chuka, I won't let them take this school. Her words sent a warmth through him, cutting through the fear and the cold. But before he could reply, one of the policemen shouted from the far side of the site. Madam, we found something, buried under the north wall. Adi's frowned and stood, leading Chuka carefully as they followed the officer. The builders trailed behind, whispering in confusion. The officer knelt and brushed away wet soil, revealing a rusted metal box. He pried it open, and inside were sealed brown packets with strange stamps. He picked one up, eyes narrowing. "Madam," he said, his voice tight, "these are not building materials. This is contraband." Adi's heart lurched. Chuka stared at the packets, realization dawning in his eyes. This was why the armed men wanted the land. This was what had been hidden under their feet all along. Before anyone could speak, a phone rang. It was Adi's assistant, his voice frantic over the noise. "Madam, we just got a message. Those men, they're coming back. And they're not alone this time." Adi's and Chuka locked eyes, fear and determination burning between them as the distant sound of more engines echoed in the rainy night. The distant growl of engines carried through the damp night air like the warning of a storm yet to break. Everyone on the site froze, eyes turning toward the dark road that led back to the village. The builders exchanged nervous glances, gripping whatever tools were still in their hands, shovels, crowbars, anything that could serve as a weapon. Adi's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear her own breathing over the soft patter of lingering rain. The open metal box at her feet seemed to glow in the dim light from the police trucks, those brown packets like cursed treasure that had brought danger to their doorstep. Chuka pushed himself to his feet with a grunt, his shoulders screaming in protest, but he didn't care. He stood tall, mud-streaked and fearless, eyes scanning the dark road. "They know we found it," he said, his voice low but steady. "They're coming to take it back." Adi's turned to the police officer in charge. "We need backup. Now." The officer spoke quickly into his radio, his tone urgent. "Alpha Team, respond immediately. Possible armed return, over." Static answered him, and he cursed under his breath. "There's still 15 minutes out, madam. We're on our own until then." 15 minutes felt like forever. Adi's mind raced. She looked around at the builders, simple men, strong but unarmed, most of them fathers with families waiting at home. They hadn't signed up for this. "Get them out of here," she said firmly, turning to the officer. "Please, take them somewhere safe." "No." Chuka cut in sharply, shaking his head. "We don't run. If we run, they'll burn this place, bury the proof, and no one will believe what happened." Adiz looked at him, torn between fear and admiration. His eyes blazed with a quiet fire she couldn't ignore. "Chuka, this school," he said, stepping closer, his voice trembling with conviction, "is more than cement and bricks. It's our promise to the children here. I won't watch them take that away." For a second, Adiz could only stare at him. He stood in front of her like a man ready to face an army with nothing but his bare hands. A part of her wanted to grab him, drag him into her car, and drive far away. But another part, stronger, louder, whispered that he was right. The officer snapped back into action. "All right," he barked to his men. "Form a perimeter. Any civilians who want to leave, go now." Some builders hesitated, but none of them moved. They stood taller, gripping their tools, their faces grim. Chuka's courage had lit something in them. Adiz's driver ran up, out of breath. "Madam, we moved your car behind the storage shed. But what if they come with more guns?" Adiz straightened her shoulders, brushing mud from her baboo, though it did little to clean her up. Her hair was loose now, sticking to her face. She didn't care. "Then we hold until help comes," she said quietly. The growling engines were louder now, headlights flickering in the distance like angry eyes. The builders tightened their grips on their tools. Chuka stepped forward, scanning the site for anything they could use. "Those iron rods, line them along the entrance. It'll slow them down," he instructed. They moved quickly, dragging rods, shifting blocks. Adiz joined them without hesitation, her delicate hands tugging at heavy cement bags until Chuka stopped her. "You've done enough, madam. Stay back." She looked at him, chest tight. "And leave you here?" Chuka hesitated, then gave a small smile despite the tension. "You're not like the others, Adiz. But if something happens to you—" A sudden burst of headlights flooded the site as two black SUVs screeched to a halt at the edge of the road. Doors flew open, and dark figures stepped out, some carrying sticks, others unmistakably armed. The man in the blue caftan was among them, his face twisted with fury. "You think you can stop me?" he shouted, his voice booming across the site. "You think a few builders and a woman can stand in my way?" Adi's heart thudded, but she didn't step back. She moved to stand beside Chuka, her chin lifted. "This land is not yours, and neither is what you buried under it." The man laughed coldly, then raised his hand. His men began to spread out, advancing toward the site like wolves circling prey. One of them fired a warning shot into the air, the sharp crack splitting the night. The builders flinched, but didn't run. Chuka raised a rusted spade, gripping it like a spear. "Stay behind the blocks," he told them quietly. "We hold them until the police come." Adiz felt her knees weaken, but she refused to show fear. She stepped closer to Chuka, her shoulder brushing his arm. "We do this together," she whispered. The man in the caftan snarled and took another step forward. "Then you'll both regret it." He gestured sharply. "Bring me the box, then kill anyone who stands in your way." With that command, his men charged forward, feet pounding the muddy ground as more headlights appeared behind them, suggesting even more vehicles arriving. Adiz gasped, grabbing Chuka's arm as the armed men closed in. Chuka's eyes hardened, and he tightened his grip on the spade, ready to defend the ground he had bled for. The night filled with shouting, the scrape of boots on mud, and the low hum of fear turning into raw courage as the two sides collided. The clash was sudden and violent. Mud flew as boots pounded against the wet earth. The builders, though outnumbered and poorly armed, stood shoulder to shoulder, brandishing their shovels, rods, and anything they could grab. The attackers surged forward, some swinging machetes, others shouting threats that cut through the night air. Adiz's heart hammered in her chest as she ducked behind a stack of cement bags, her hands trembling. She had never been this close to real danger, never smelled the iron tang of fear in the air. Her eyes darted across the chaos, searching desperately for Chuka. She spotted him near the center of the site, his spade raised like a warrior's spear. An armed man lunged at him with a stick wrapped in barbed wire, but Chuka twisted aside, the barbs missing his face by inches. With a powerful swing, Chuka slammed the spade into the man's leg, sending him sprawling into the mud with a howl. Another attacker rushed Chuka from behind. Adiz gasped and shouted, "Chuka!" He spun just in time, catching the blow on his injured shoulder. Pain shot through him like fire, but he gritted his teeth, grabbed the man's wrist, and shoved him backward into a stack of rods. The man yelped as the rods clattered to the ground. The builders fought with desperation, their faces fierce and determined. Kunnel, the apprentice, swung a length of wood at an attacker's arm, knocking the weapon from his hand. Musa, still limping from his earlier ordeal, tackled another man to the ground despite the mud slick beneath them. But the attackers kept coming, more pouring out of the SUVs. Adiz's driver yelled as he tried to shield her, holding a crowbar in both hands. "Stay down, madam." "I can't," she cried back, grabbing a loose brick. Her hand shook as she hurled it toward an attacker who was closing in on one of the builders. The brick struck the man's shoulder, making him stumble. The builder turned and struck him with a rod, sending him sprawling. A gunshot rang out, louder than all the shouting. Everyone froze for a split second. Adiz's eyes flew wide as she saw one of the older builders clutch his arm, blood staining his shirt. "Papa Beezy!" Kunnel screamed, dragging the wounded man behind the cement bags. Chuka's jaw tightened as rage surged through him. He charged toward the man who fired the shot, knocking the pistol from his hand with the flat of his spade. The weapon slid across the mud. Another attacker lunged at Chuka, swinging a machete, but Chuka dodged and slammed his knee into the man's stomach. Adiz felt tears sting her eyes. "They're going to kill us. They're really going to kill us." But then distant sirens. Faint at first, then growing louder. Blue and red lights began to flash through the trees. The sound gave the builders new energy, the shouts growing louder as they pushed back. The man in the blue caftan's eyes narrowed. "Get the box," he bellowed, pointing toward the contraband. Two of his men broke through the chaos, racing for the buried packets. Chuka saw them and cursed under his breath. He tried to run after them, but pain flared through his shoulder and his legs felt heavy. Adiz didn't think. She ran past her driver, past the cement bags, straight toward the men reaching for the box. One of them laughed at the sight of her. "Stay out of this, woman, before you get hurt." Her hands curled into fists. "You're not taking it." The man sneered and reached into his jacket. Adiz's stomach dropped as she saw the glint of another weapon. Chuka shouted, "Adiz, get back!" But his voice was drowned out by another gunshot, this one fired straight into the air as a warning. The man aimed the weapon at Adiz, his finger tightening on the trigger. She froze, her breath caught in her throat, the whole world shrinking to that single barrel pointed at her chest. Chuka roared and charged despite the pain, grabbing a fallen iron rod as he ran. With all the strength left in him, he swung it hard, knocking the gun out of the man's hand. The weapon fired as it hit the ground, the bullet whistling past Adiz's ear and burying itself in the wooden scaffold behind her. The second man swung at Chuka with a heavy stick. It slammed into Chuka's ribs, and he staggered, gasping in pain. Adiz screamed his name and lunged forward, grabbing the stick with both hands and yanking it back. The man growled and shoved her away. She hit the mud hard, pain shooting through her elbow. Chuka, still reeling, saw the man raising the stick high above Adiz, ready to bring it down on her. He didn't think. He didn't feel the pain in his body anymore. He threw himself at the attacker, tackling him to the ground. They rolled in the mud, fists flying. Chuka's rage fueled by something deeper than fear, something fierce and unshakable. The sirens were close now. Police trucks skidded onto the site, headlights flooding the chaos. Armed officers poured out, shouting commands. "Drop your weapons. Hands in the air." Gunfire cracked as warning shots lit the air. Some attackers fled toward the trees, others froze in place. Chuka pinned the man beneath him, fists pounding until the man stopped struggling. Mud and blood smeared Chuka's knuckles as he pushed himself up, chest heaving. Adiz scrambled to her knees, tears and rain streaking her face. "Chuka!" she cried, running to him. He turned, their eyes locking in the blinding light of the police trucks. Relief washed over her as she saw him still standing, still alive. She threw her arms around him, not caring that his clothes were soaked and muddy. He held her tight, his breath warm against her ear. "You're safe," he whispered hoarsely. "Thank God you're safe." But the night wasn't over. The police officers dragged the captured attackers into cuffs, but the man in the blue kaftan was nowhere to be seen. One officer ran up, out of breath. "Madam." "Sir." "The leader, he's escaped. He's heading toward the river road with the last SUV." Adiz pulled back from Chuka, her eyes wide. "He's getting away with the others?" The officer nodded grimly. "And we think he's taking some of the packets with him. We need someone to guide us through the back path before he disappears into the bush." Chuka's jaw tightened, his fists clenching. Pain still shot through his body, but fire burned in his eyes. "I know the path," he said, his voice low. "I can take you." Adiz grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "No, Chuka. You're hurt. Let the police handle it." He shook his head, determination etched into every line of his face. "If he escapes, he'll come back. This ends tonight." Before she could stop him, Chuka moved toward the lead police truck, climbing in with a wince. Adiz stood frozen in the flashing lights, her heart in her throat, watching him as the engine roared to life. The trucks tore down the muddy road toward the dark river path, sirens wailing into the night, leaving Adiz standing in the wreckage of the site, whispering a prayer she had not said in years. The night swallowed the convoy as the police trucks rumbled down the narrow path, their headlights bouncing off the thick bush on either side. Adiz stood rooted in the muddy site, her hands clasped over her mouth, her heart thudding with every echo of those sirens fading into the distance. Around her, the builders were quiet, exhausted, bloodied, some sitting on overturned buckets, others leaning against broken walls. The rain had stopped, but the ground still glistened under the dim light of the security lamps. Adiz's driver brought her a jacket, but she didn't even feel the cold. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark road, where Chuka had disappeared. Kunal limped over, wiping tears mixed with mud from his face. "Madam," he said softly, "Oga Chuka is strong. He will catch that man. He will. Adiz nodded, but her voice was barely a whisper. He shouldn't have gone. He's hurt. He's already done enough. In her mind, flashes of Chuka's bravery replayed, his hands gripping the spade, his body shielding her, the look in his eyes when he told her she was safe. Her chest ached in a way she didn't understand, deeper than fear, sharper than worry. The police officers who stayed behind began gathering evidence from the metal box, sealing the packets into plastic bags. One of them, a tall man with a scar along his cheek, approached Adiz with a respectful nod. "Madam, your statement will be important, but first you need to rest. We'll watch the site." Adiz shook her head. "I can't rest while he's out there." "Madam," the officer said gently, "he's with trained men. They'll handle it." But Adiz got twisted. Something told her the man in the blue kaftan wasn't done. He was desperate, dangerous, and willing to destroy anyone in his way. She paced the site, her muddy shoes squelching with every step. Minutes passed like hours. The builders murmured prayers under their breath, some clutching wooden crosses, others whispering words in Igbo and Yoruba. Then, faint in the distance, a single gunshot cracked through the night. Everyone froze. Adiz's heart jumped to her throat. "That's them," she breathed, eyes wide. Colonel looked toward the road. "It's far, maybe it's warning shots." But another shot followed, and then shouting carried on the wind, faint but frantic. Adiz felt her knees go weak. Chuka, she thought, her hands trembling. One of the police radios on a nearby truck crackled to life. A frantic voice burst through the static. "We've got fire. They've blocked the road near the river. Repeat, suspects armed, heavy resistance." Adiz gasped. "No, no, no." The officer with the scar grabbed the radio. "Hold position. Reinforcements on the way." He barked orders to his team, but the chaos and the voice on the radio didn't stop. Through the garbled transmission, Adiz caught pieces of words. "Truck overturned, shots fired. They're trying to escape through the old ferry crossing." She turned to the officer, her voice breaking. "They'll kill him." "We're moving now," the officer shouted, signaling to his men. They piled into another truck, weapons ready. He turned to Adiz. "Stay here, madam. It's not safe." But she shook her head violently. "No, I'm going. Madam, if anything happens to him while I wait here, I'll never forgive myself," she said, her eyes fierce. "I'm coming." There was no time to argue. The officer cursed under his breath and opened the passenger door of the second truck. "Stay behind me. Don't leave the vehicle." Adiz climbed in, her heart racing, her hands shaking as she gripped the dashboard. The truck roared to life, skidding out onto the dark road, tires spraying mud. Behind them, the builders watched in silence, whispering prayers into the night. The road was narrow, lined with tall bushes and twisted trees. Branches scratched at the windows as the truck bounced over deep potholes. The sirens ahead grew louder, mixed with shouts and the occasional crack of gunfire. Adiz's stomach churned with every turn. They rounded a bend, and headlights flashed across a horrifying sight. One of the police trucks lay on its side in the mud, smoke rising from the engine. A wounded officer staggered toward them, waving frantically. "They set a trap," he shouted. "Spikes on the road." Adiz's breath caught as she looked beyond the wreck. Down near the old ferry crossing, figures moved in the shadows, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. And then there he was, Chuka, crouched behind the wreck of another vehicle, clutching an iron rod like a spear, his face streaked with blood and mud, his eyes burning with defiance as two armed men closed in on him from both sides. Adiz's scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. "Chuka!" The officer beside her shouted. "Stay in the truck." But Adiz's hand was already on the door handle, her heart pounding, her mind screaming that she couldn't watch him die. Not after everything they had survived together. She flung the door open, ignoring the shouts behind her, and ran into the chaos, mud sucking at her shoes, the sharp crack of gunfire splitting the air as she rushed toward Chuka with tears streaming down her face. The night air was thick with smoke and fear as Adiz dashed across the muddy clearing, her breath coming in frantic gasps. Gunshots ripped through the darkness, each one making her flinch, but not stop. She ducked behind a rusted metal drum, heart pounding, eyes locked on Chuka. Chuka was struggling to stay upright. One of the armed men lunged at him with a machete, the blade slicing through the air where Chuka's head had been a second earlier. Chuka swung his iron rod in a desperate arc, striking the man's wrist and sending the weapon spinning into the mud. The man stumbled back with a howl of pain. The second attacker came at Chuka from the side, a long hunting knife glinting in his hand. Chuka twisted, but pain seared through his shoulder, slowing him down. The knife grazed his side, and he grunted, blood darkening his shirt. "No!" Adiz cried, scrambling from her cover. She grabbed a broken plank lying nearby, her fingers trembling, her chest tight with terror. She ran toward them, adrenaline drowning out her fear. The man raised the knife again, and in that split second, Adiz swung the plank with all the strength she could muster. The wood cracked against the attacker's back, making him stumble forward into Chuka's waiting fist. Chuka punched him square in the jaw, sending him sprawling into the mud. Chuka turned, eyes wide as he saw Adiz standing there, plank raised, rain and tears streaming down her face. "Adiz," he shouted hoarsely, "what are you doing here?" "I couldn't leave you," she screamed back, her voice breaking. But there was no time to argue. The man in the blue kaftan appeared from the shadows, flanked by two more armed men. His face was twisted with rage, his fine clothes now splattered with mud. He pointed a pistol directly at Chuka's chest. "You," he hissed, his voice low and deadly. "You think you've won because you saved a few bricks and some packets? Tonight you die." Adiz's breath caught. She moved instinctively, stepping in front of Chuka. "If you shoot him," she said, her voice shaking but loud, "then you'll have to shoot me too." The man sneered, tilting his head. "Then so be it." The pistol lifted, the barrel cold and black in the dim light. Chuka's heart lurched. He grabbed Adiz's arm, trying to pull her behind him, but she refused to move. Time seemed to slow. Adiz could hear the pounding of her own heart, the ragged breathing of the wounded, the distant wail of approaching reinforcements still minutes away. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. Chuka's mind raced. "I can't let her die. Not after everything. Not her." Then, from the darkness behind them, a loud engine roared. Headlights flared, blinding everyone for a split second. A second police truck burst onto the scene, tires skidding through the mud. Officers jumped out, guns raised. "Drop your weapon," one of them shouted. The man in the blue kaftan cursed, grabbing Adiz by the arm and yanking her close, the pistol now pressed against her temple. "Nobody move," he bellowed, "or she dies right here." Adiz gasped, her hands clawing at his arm, her feet slipping in the mud as he dragged her backward toward the shadows. Chuka's stomach dropped, his vision narrowing to that single image, Adiz in the man's grip, terror in her eyes. "Adiz!" he shouted, taking a step forward. "Stay back!" The man roared, pressing the gun harder against her head. The officers froze, unsure of their next move. The builders who had followed the truck stood frozen in horror. Chuka's hands curled into fists, his body trembling with fury and helplessness. The man backed toward the tree line, dragging Adiz with him. "You think you can build your little dreams here?" he snarled. "This land belongs to men like me, and I'll bury your bodies here to prove it." Adiz whimpered, trying to twist out of his grip, but the cold steel dug into her skin. Chuka's mind screamed at him to do something, anything, but his feet felt heavy, his injured shoulder burning. The man reached the edge of the bush, his eyes wild. "Say goodbye to your hero," he spat in Adiz's ear, cocking the pistol with a sharp click. "No!" Chuka roared, breaking into a desperate sprint despite the pain, mud spraying under his feet. He snatched up the fallen iron rod and raised it high, aiming for the man's arm. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then, just as Chuka leapt forward, the man jerked Adiz closer and swung the pistol toward him, finger tightening on the trigger. A single gunshot exploded in the night,